Welcome dear students. Today we will discuss the topic biodiversity surrogates, types and uses. First we will start with what are surrogates. Biodiversity surrogate is a single or a group of species used for biodiversity conservation or making inferences about the status or trends of a biodiversity target. Surrogate species are used as conservation tool that monitor habitat health and measure effectiveness of conservation efforts. While the distinction between surrogate and direct measurement can be ambiguous, surrogate species are defined as species that are used to represent other species or aspects of the environment to attain a conservation objective. In a broader sense, biodiversity surrogate is a species group or an ecosystem attribute that is used as a proxy for another species or aspect of biodiversity target. By protecting these surrogates, we tend to protect the whole ecosystem. The presence, absence, abundance, dispersion or other attributes of a surrogate species are used as an index or as a measure of attribute of other target species. Their stats is assumed to reflect the stats of other species in the same community. The use of biodiversity surrogate species increased rapidly in recent years. Various types of surrogate species that are used for the purpose include umbrella species, flagship species, indicator species, focal species or group of species selected on the basis of their taxonomical studies, habitat, life history and other ecological functions. Abiotic factors are also used to provide a shortcut method or easy way of monitoring some aspects of ecosystem in conservation programs. The need for surrogates in conservation planning for biodiversity loss are accelerating as human dominance of Earth's natural systems increases. Accordingly, protected areas are recognized as key components of national and international conservation strategies. In this regard, surrogates are used to locate biodiversity rich zones, nature reserves, track human influences on habitats and track changes in population structure. Moreover, we have enough of data for some regions, some taxa or aspects of biodiversity, but we do not have perfect knowledge of biodiversity and its distribution for any part of the world or any taxonomic group. Conservation planning is therefore necessarily based on those surrogates for which data is available or for which data can be obtained easily in a monitoring program. Based on these facts, surrogates that are usually used fall into two broad categories. Number one, better known taxa such as birds or mammals. Number second, features such as vegetation types or other land classes that can be easily mapped or identified. By considering surrogates as a part of conservation planning, it is assumed that conservation efforts made to protect biodiversity features selected as surrogates in the conservation planning exercise are also effective for the conservation of unmapped biodiversity. It is a faith based on the hope that the known biodiversity is a good surrogate for the unknown. Let us discuss Why do we need surrogates? It is not always possible to directly monitor key biodiversity variables at ideal spatio-temporal resolutions due to resource or logistic constraints. Surrogates are regarded as a solution to the logistic and financial challenges of monitoring complex systems. So, we can say a biodiversity surrogate is intended to provide useful and reliable information about some aspects of biodiversity which otherwise are difficult or too costly to measure directly. It is a fact that the most effective and least expensive way of preserving biodiversity is by maintaining native species in their habitats where there is the greatest chance of success in ensuring long-term conservation. Although multiple conservation planning methods have been developed in this direction, a factor limiting their application is the availability of adequate data. Since conservation planning relies fundamentally on spatial information about the distribution of biodiversity, where money, time or logistic challenges hamper monitoring efforts of any aspect of biodiversity, surrogates are instead used as a measure in lieu of the direct variables of interest. For example, Phascolarctos cineris, also known as koala bear, is an arboreal herbivore native to Australia. It was classified as least concerned on the red list, but assessed as vulnerable in 2014. Direct monitoring of koalas can be costly and time intensive, as koalas are cryptic species. They occur at low densities and they are difficult to observe in dense forest canopies. For koalas, the presence of fecal pellets on the forest floor is a rapid and reliable proxy or a surrogate for estimating occupancy of koalas over large areas. Resources, for example, land and money available for conservation are limited, so their allocation must be planned strategically. This recognition prompted the development of complementarity based methods of systematic conservation planning aimed at ensuring efficient use of scarce conservation resources. Well-designed programs can establish baseline conditions, determine trends in threatened species populations, quantify the effects of management and provide warning of ecosystem changes. Monitoring programs are intended to inform effective biodiversity conservation and management. For these reasons, biodiversity monitoring underpins the activities of land management agencies worldwide. Practically speaking, surrogates appear to be a solution to this, keeping in view the logistic and financial challenges of monitoring complex systems. Before surrogates can be confidently integrated into monitoring programs, a considerable initial investment of resources may be needed to evaluate, surrogate and ensure that they are fit for the purpose. Many frameworks have been developed to assist in selecting biodiversity surrogates and indicators while considering practical constraints, different surrogate applications or taxon specific requirements. Let us briefly discuss some examples of surrogate species. There are several terms that refer to the co-occurring species that are likely to benefit from conservation activities directed at a surrogate species. These include umbrella species, flagship species, indicator species. focal species, endemic species, etc. Let us discuss them one by one. Number 1, umbrella species. A species typically with wide habitat range whose conservation confers protection to a large number of naturally co-occurring species are known as umbrella species. These species typically require large areas to maintain minimum viable populations. Umbrella species are named so typically because protecting these species indirectly protects many other species that make up the ecological community of its habitat. Usually, large mammals like grizzly bears, jaguars, etc. are considered as umbrella species as they have a very wide habitat range. The niche of many other small species is a part of their habitat. Conservation of these species in their large habitats automatically gives protection to other species. It has been observed that removal of such species from their natural habitats has led to the removal of protection facilities by the government, exposing other species in that area to threats of biodiversity loss. Species conservation is subjective, and usually large biodiversity rich areas like biosphere reserves are created for the protection of large number of apparently important species of mammals and birds, which leads to the protection of other less known species like invertebrates and the associated microflora. Umbrella species are used to select the location of these reserves and to determine the minimum size of the reserves. The commonly used criteria for selecting an umbrella species is a wide ranging species whose requirements include those of many other species, a species with large area requirements for which protection of the species offers protection to other species that share the same habitat. This assumption is stated explicitly for area needs of umbrella species. However, the extended umbrella species concept is broadened to include other attributes of landscapes such as habitat connectivity, the occurrence of various ecosystem processes, or the distribution of scarce resources. For example, Filori et al. And Langveld et al. Used the California netcatcher and the European nuthatch as umbrella bird species for reserve network planning. Instead of using only the occurrence or area requirements of these birds for reserve site selection, they also considered their need for connectivity. The underlying assumption here is that the landscape that are sufficiently connected for the umbrella species should also be functional for many other species. Let us discuss briefly the types of umbrella species. The types of umbrella species have been recognized. Number 1, classical umbrella species. In this concept, the location, size and configuration of areas occupied by viable population of the species, the umbrella species, is assumed to identify sites or areas in larger landscapes or regions that support viable population of beneficiary species. Number 2, local umbrella species. The occurrence of the umbrella species in a particular geographic area is assumed to indicate or predict the occurrence of beneficiary species. So, reserves that are delineated to meet the habitat requirements of the umbrella species will contain as many of the beneficiary species as possible. This concept corresponds with the site selection umbrella species concept, because umbrella species have been used to indicate the presence of beneficiary species. There is conceptual overlap between umbrella species and biodiversity indicators. However, the two concepts have been used at different spatial scales. Umbrella species have typically been used to identify conservation areas at regional or local spatial scales, while as biodiversity indicators have been used at global or continental levels. Unfortunately, the terms are often used interchangeably at the regional level. Number third is management umbrella species. Management umbrella species may predict population responses of other species to planned human activities. This type of surrogate species combines criteria distinguishing management and environmental indicator species and emphasizes on one species serving as a general surrogate for other species. Let us take the example of the jaguars. The jaguar stands out as a key piece in the forest salivatory puzzle because it is a charismatic top predator. It is considered as an umbrella species. This species, by the nature of its habitat needs, serves as a conservation proxy for protecting other animals and plants that depend on the same habitat. Protecting this species in its habitat will ensure a future for other species too. The territory of one male jaguar extends between 8,000 to 15,000 hectares and does not overlap with that of the other males. Females, on the other hand, require expanses half that size. Their land can be contained within that of a male but will not be shared with other females. Knowing how many individuals there are in the forest and how many would make up a population that would survive in the long term will help to define the minimal forest area needed to be protected. One more species concept that is discussed under umbrella species is focal species. Lambeck argued that a single species is not likely to represent the diversity of habitat needs of all the species that occur in ecosystems or landscapes. It would be more appropriate to use a set of species rather than a single umbrella species. This involves identifying the main threats in an area or region and selecting focal species that are most sensitive to each threat. As such, the selected suite or group of species, each of which represents or defines characteristics of different attribute or threats, are together termed as focal species. The spatial, functional and compositional requirement of these species would be used to guide the development of conservation and restoration policies. Thus, the focal species approach is consistent with the general definition of umbrella species. It simply goes beyond earlier approaches by addressing habitat quality and by proposing systematic criteria for the selection of a suite of umbrella species. Lambeck suggests 4 threat categories for focal species. They are: number 1, area limited; number 2, resource limited; number 3, dispersal limited; number 4, process limited. Each of these categories should be represented by one or a few focal species. Mammals, birds and to a lesser extent insects dominate as umbrella species, although mammals have often been proposed as area demanding umbrellas, birds and insects seem to have been preferred for the site selection and extended umbrella concepts. For example, bison is considered as a focal species for North American prairies. One more concept is landscape species. Landscape species are those species that use large areas, have significant impact on the structure and function of natural ecosystem. The concept involves selection of a suite of focal species defined by their ability to represent all major habitats, management zones and threats at a site, their use of large heterogeneous areas and structure and functions that impact on natural ecosystem. To sum up with, what qualities should a dream team of focal species possess to be a dependable tool of biodiversity assessment and conservation planning? It should cover the main ecosystem or landscape types of concern in a region. For each landscape type, the most sensitive group of species in terms of resources, area requirements, connectivity and natural processes, for example fire and flooding regimes, should be selected. Another species type that is used as surrogate is flagship species. A flagship species is a species selected to act as an ambassador, icon or symbol for a defined habitat, issue, campaign or environmental cause. By focusing on and achieving conservation of that species, the status of many other species which share its habitat or which are vulnerable to the same threats may also be improved. Flagship species are usually relatively large, charismatic and attractive species. They are selected for their attractiveness, distinctiveness or vulnerability. As such, these species are aimed to gain public support, fundraising, public awareness, influence policy making, promote ecotourism and community based conservation. Flagship species may or may not be keystone species, and they may or may not be good indicators of biological processes. For example, the 7-colored tanager bird is a flagship species for the forests of Brazil. Other examples are Indian tiger, African elephant, Chinese giant panda and leatherback sea turtle. Then we have keystone species. A keystone species is a species that plays an essential role in the structure, functioning or productivity of a habitat or ecosystem at a defined level. Disappearance of such species may lead to significant ecosystem change or dysfunction, which may have knock-on effects on a broader scale. By focusing on keystone species, conservation actions for that species may help to preserve the structure and function of a wide range of habitats which are linked with that species during its life cycle. Examples include the elephant's role in maintaining habitat structure and bats and insects in pollination. The sea star pisaster ochraceus, the keystone species, feeds preferentially on mussels on northeast Pacific rocky shores. By doing so, the predatory sea star prevents mussels from taking over the entire shore and allows less competitive species to persist, thus enhancing local species diversity. As keystone species, African elephants stop the progression of grasslands to forest or thicket by weeding out the trees and shrubs. Elephants browse on these woody plants, uproot young trees, stunt their growth by eating the growth points on their branches, Even if a tree or two escape the weeding, they won't last long. Sooner or later, an elephant will push the plant over, yank it out of the ground, or kill it slowly by prying away its bark. Another species type used as surrogate is indicator species. An indicator species is a species or group of species chosen as an indicator of the state of an ecosystem or of a certain process within that ecosystem. There are taxon based indicators. Their presence or absence is correlated with the significant changes in biodiversity in a taxonomic group. It relies on the existence of relation between the richness of lower and higher taxa in the same group. There is positive correlation between species richness and family richness. Then biodiversity indicator, the species richness of an indicator taxon is used as an indicator for species richness of a community. Some other parameters which is measurable endemism, species richness, genetic parameters, landscape parameter and population specific parameters. Then we have ecological indicators. Ecological bioindicator species are sensitive to pollution, fragmentation of habitat and other ecological stresses. Its response is represented by the specific community. Environmental indicators, a bioindicator which responds predictably to environmental disturbances or changes, that is, which works as surveillance detector, overexploiter or accumulator in any ecosystem or environment. A set of environmental indicators diagnose the state of the ecosystem. Examples include crayfish as indicator of freshwater quality, corals as indicators of marine processes such as siltation, seawater rise and sea temperature fluctuation, peregrine falcons as an indicator of pesticide loads, native plants as indicators for the presence and impact of alien species. Such species provide information on presence and stats of wide range of species and ecosystem health. So, indicator species are those whose characteristics such as presence, absence, population density, dispersion or reproductive success are used as index of attributes which are too difficult or expensive to measure for other species or environmental conditions. Other related concepts used as surrogates are endemic species. Endemic species are restricted in distribution to a particular geographic area and they are found nowhere else. These species are used as major criteria for recognizing biodiversity hotspots. Then we have priority species concept. Priority species is a WWF term and it is solely for the purpose of planning and simple communication. A priority species may be either a flagship or a keystone species and it is chosen to represent a region. A priority species is reflective of a key threat across that ecoregion such that conservation of the species will contribute significantly to a broader threat mitigation outcome. It is often crucial to the economic or spiritual well-being of people within that ecoregion. Then we have sentinel species. These organisms are used to detect risks because of the environmental hazards and they can provide advance warning about a danger. Species that are more sensitive and susceptible to some hazard can act as sentinel species. For example, cats in Minamata Bay, Japan developed a disease known as dancing cat fever due to eating of mercury contaminated fish well before humans were affected. other type of species concept is exploiter species. Presence of these species indicates the probability of disturbance or pollution in an area. For example, presence of many red chironomid larvae indicates pollution in water bodies. That is all about today's topic. We will meet again with a new topic. Take care. Goodbye.